Hey everyone, welcome back to another Grand Archive Fractured Crown Top 5 list. I'm Dan with Main Deck as usual, and today we are going to be looking at the top 5 sleeper picks from Grand Archive Fractured Crown. So these are specifically the cards that I'm not seeing as much discussion on, and I could be wrong. Maybe I'm just missing this gigantic discussion here, but these are the cards that I think just aren't getting as much love as maybe they should be. I think these will have just a bigger impact than I think some people are currently suspecting. So because of that, you will certainly, I think, have your own opinion. Maybe you've been on one of these cards since day one. You're like, as soon as I saw that, I knew that was going to be an important part of the metagame. And I think in some ways too, some of these aren't necessarily going to be like the top tier picks, but these are cards that may be bringing up other decks to be, disproportionately more competitive than they were before. Well, Ryan Lorraine decks may still remain good. We've got some Tamer picks in here that I think are going to help elevate Tamer decks to become at least playable, right? So that's kind of the idea with this one. If you like this content, we've got several other top 5 videos for you to watch, and we're almost done with our top 5 run. We're going to head to Gen Con very soon, and then we are going to be getting a lot of hands-on experience with Fractured Crown, which I can't wait for. Following that, we will have like a full set review and all sorts of other stuff for you guys. So if you're looking for lots more Grand Archive Fractured Crown content, hey, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I think some people forget to do it. I forget to do it with people I like on YouTube too. So make sure to click that button so you are subbed and you can catch that stuff when it goes live, because of course, Grand Archive is just one of our absolute favorite games right now. And I think you'll see the love in all this content very soon. Now, without any further ado, let's jump into our top 5 sleeper picks in Fractured Crown. All right, number 5 is honestly, this is probably just my favorite card in the set. I don't know why. I just love this card so much, from the art to the mechanics of it. It's Green Slime. Look at this thing. First of all, it's just cute. Adorable card. Love it. 3 cost Wind Ally Tamer Beast Slime. Has 0 attack and 1 life. Dan, it's terrible. It's so bad. Don't worry about it. It has Pride 3. Dan, it's so bad. Don't worry about it. It has on enter, put 2 buff counters on Green Slime. So it is a 2/3 for 3, which is a stat line we've seen on a number of other cards so far, which we think is a pretty solid stat line. The Pride 3 is a bit of a drawback, of course. We have there are other 2/3s for 3 that don't have Pride at all. However, it's this class bonus. It's this class bonus here. On leave, put the buff counters that were on Green Slime on target ally you control. Whoa. There is some play with this card. Okay, so first of all, it's any buff counters on Green Slime. Okay, so we already have Sylvie level 1 that can put buff counters on Green Slime. We have Young Beast Bonder that puts 2 buff counters on Green Slime because Green Slime is a beast. It's not an animal, it's a beast. So you're talking already about a 4/5 Pride 3 if you play a Beast Bonder into this. Pride 3 means it probably won't be attacking right away unless you're doing some pretty crazy combos, but it will not take long for it to start to attack, especially in Wind, where we have Beseech the Winds to be able to materialize things like our Ears or our Effigy of Gaia a little faster, or just get to our level 2 faster. And okay, so I love this kind of on-enter, on-leave stuff. I'm a huge fan of decks that like to blink, which means bring things in and out of play, bounce things to hand. And what can green do? Wow, it can suppress things. It can reclaim your allies. What can you do with Green Slime? Watch this. Let's say you put 2 buff counters on it with a Beast Bonder. It's now a 4/5. Crash in with your 4/5. Your opponent's like, wow, that's really big. Take 5 or take 4. That's great. Okay, afterwards, I'm going to reclaim Green Slime back to my hand, and then put these 4 counters on my Young Beast Bonder. And then, because it says target ally, it doesn't say target animal or beast, put those 4 counters on my Young Beast Bonder and now attack you for 5 more. That is really cool. That's really powerful. If you ever have 2 Green Slimes in play, oh man, this is going to be pretty juicy. The opponent has to take out all your other allies before they take out the Green Slime. It's going to become harder for them to deal with other allies. And there are a lot of ways that you can already be blinking the Green Slime around. If you use anything to suppress the Green Slime and make it come back in, then it's going to put its counters on something else and come back in and get more counters. And then when it leaves again, it puts its counters on something else. It's just, this I think is going to be a powerful little shell for Wind Tamer decks to take. Wind Tamer decks also already have Windstream Mutt, which is another way to put counters on things. that it's kind of, I feel like it's all coming together for this Wind Tamer deck to be able to put out some surprisingly gigantic beasts pretty early on, and really just has to work on managing that pride. Can you get the pride online to attack with these things soon enough? Once you do, you have lots of ways to make these beasts way bigger than your opponent can even necessarily cleave away, not to mention when you add in things like Effigy of Gaia, making them hard to deal with. I love this green slime. I put it as my number 5 sleeper pick just because all of our lower sleeper picks are actually the Tamer ones, and I'm still not sure. I'm not sure how playable Tamer is going to be quite yet, because Tamer did have a bit of a distance to cover, but Fractured Crown adds disproportionate Tamer support compared to the other champions if you do breakdowns of things like classes that got floating memory and that kind of stuff. So it's I think, I'm excited to test it, but Green Slime is certainly going to be a card that I am looking at very strongly at testing, because it has all the makings of a card that is just very hard to deal with and accrues advantage very quickly. So that's number 5, Green Slime. Number 4 is a card that I play with Green Slime for sure. This card is called Displace. This is a 2-cost action cleric/mage spell with fast speed. That's really important. And it has banish target ally, then return it to the field under its owner's control rested. It has class bonus, put an enlighten counter on your champion. I'm putting this in Tamer. I don't care about the class bonus. However, it's really cool that if you're playing cleric or mage, and we've seen, I think, a few cleric things now that might reference enlighten counters. So beginning to be curious if cleric's going to use more enlighten counters as well. Once we get that in, I think, the next set. But what this already does is it immediately banishes and returns an ally to play rested. So first of all, just if one of your allies gets attacked, if your opponent's trying to get rid of your big beast, you can displace it. Nice and easy. It'll end the combat phase because it comes in as a different unit, is no longer the unit that was being attacked. When you do this on a green slime, you get to also move the counters over to something else, and then it comes in with more counters on it, which is just awesome. Really powerful. You can do that also with Young Beast Bonder. You can do that with Windstream Mutt. And if you're talking about the Mage deck where you're also going to want to play this card, you have cards like Zephyr Assistant. Wind Mage, actually, by the way, I think is a very underrated deck that has some very, very interesting and potent plays. I know Main Deck Mike did a profile very early on Wind Mage, and his deck has evolved a bit since then, and he's going ham testing it in set 2 and has some interesting opinions on it for everyone to check out as well. But the Zephyr Assistant with Displace is obviously very strong because it gets an enlighten counter when it comes into play. It gets an enlighten counter when it leaves. It gets an enlighten counter when it comes into play, and you get an enlighten counter from Displace. Basically, Displace with Zephyr Assistant in play naturally gives you 3 counters. At the very worst, it's doing just a cycle for a card, pay 2, draw a card, which in Mage is sometimes all you really need to do. Just kind of spin your wheels, put the right cards into your memory to materialize the next turn without risking the wrong things, and just keep the gas flowing until you get to the point where you can combo and win the game. I think Displace is a very cool card. I think it's going to see play in decks, a number of decks, because utilizing that's very strong. And I think it's going to see play outside of Cleric and Mage. In particular, I think Tamer is going to really like to play around with this card quite a bit as well. I call it a sleeper pick because I think a lot of people are going to focus on Cleric and Mage for it, which is going to be good on Mage. Well, we don't know about Cleric, but it's going to be good on Mage for sure. But I think you want to test this in other elements as well. Plus, you can just use it to stop something from dying. That's really great too. So great card. Number 4 is Displace. All right, my number 3 sleeper pick, and this is actually my last Tamer pick for the video. I know Tamer, but you know what? We got to make Tamer good. So Steady Verse is my number 3 sleeper pick for the set. This is a 2-cost slow action cleric. Again, cleric, interesting, /Tamer skill melody, which has class bonus. The next harmony action you activate this turn costs 1 less to activate, and draw a card into your memory. Steady Verse is a super innocuous card. It doesn't seem like it is doing a lot, but this is actually a pretty cool card because it is going to spend itself from your hand, and then it is going to count as having another card in your hand for the next activation of a harmony card, which as a melody, it then will empower to be able to do what you want it to do. And then it draws a card into your memory. So next turn you keep yourself stocked up. One of the big issues Tamer has right now is that it's going to play a bunch of stuff to the board. And then if that board gets answered, it just has very little left. If that board doesn't get answered, it just gets kind of like stalled out. It doesn't have much cards in hand left to be able to play more things, to play game ending stuff. So I really like this because Steadyverse is a card. That will play into that music engine, especially if you're looking to play like an Allen level 2, that will keep your cards sort of flowing, keep managing your resources a little bit, and making your next harmony one less to activate is, I found just sometimes you're missing exactly one card to be able to pull off the Erupting Rhapsody combo to win the game or something, to like double Erupting Rhapsody. And Steadyverse can count as your melody and kind of do that work for you. This is going to go great alongside Blissful Calling that Tamer decks kind of already want to play as a melody that turns itself into usually an animal or beast in your deck. And when you look at the breadth of the different melodies available right now, Steadyverse is tied with Blissful Calling and Piper's Lullaby as the cheapest in a total resource sense way to turn on a Harmonize action later in the turn, because it does cost you 2, but it reduces that cost by 1. So it's an effective cost of 1 compared to the other ones. And compared to Blissful Calling and Piper's Lullaby, I think it compares very favorably to Blissful Calling, except it guarantees you get a card, you just don't get that card that turn. Whereas Piper's Lullaby doesn't actually increase your resources whatsoever. So I think it's a very, very fine, and I think actually a good melody to play if you're trying to build that music engine out and you want to be able to activate some Harmonize abilities later in the turn, which I think is a route that is pretty good for Tamer to take right now, because that package gives you some pretty consistent resource gain. I like the Allen build. Some of my first Tamer builds I'm testing are still Allen focused. Because you don't have the drawback of having to juggle advanced elements in addition to the other things Tamer's already trying to juggle. And Allen has pretty consistent card draw, and as long as you play this sort of music package, and has that additional level gain, which lets him get to those higher pride values a turn faster than like the Sylvie level 3 decks can. So his end game isn't going to be quite as explosive, but as you were seeing earlier in this video, when you're doing things with green slime, I think you have a more explosive early game. And this kind of stuff like Steadyverse is just going to help keep your cards flowing so that you can hopefully finish the game before your opponent finishes you. So that's my number 3 pick and our last Tamer pick on the list, I promise, Steadyverse. All right, so I was looking at my list, and actually, you know what? I was wrong. I have to say I was wrong. My number 2 pick's also a Tamer card. I don't know what it is. I forgot that I had picked this was another Tamer card I picked. I think I forgot that this had class bonus on it, but so, okay, this is effectively 4 Tamer cards, and then our number 1 card is definitely not specific to Tamer, but is something that Tamer decks could play as well, I guess. So, whatever. Our sleeper picks are all just ways to make Tamer better, I guess. And that's just because Tamer is just so unassuming right now. It's just not doing anything in the metagame. And I think all of these cards are cards that can help prop it up. So our number 2 pick is Song of Frost. Song of Frost. Now, actually, I will say Song of Frost is playable outside of Tamer as well. It's just especially good in Tamer. Song of Frost is a 2-cost action Tamer skill melody with fast. It has class bonus. You may banish a card with floating memory from your graveyard rather than pay this card's reserve cost. That is really cool. Obviously, we've got these water decks that want to play a lot of floating memory cards and want to try and get them into the graveyard. So this is already going to, have that potential to play it being able to play this for free from your hand is going to catch people off guard all the time. It's going to be really, really nice, and does make me interested a little bit in Water Tamer as well to try and make that work. Also, we got our boy Alan. Check him out in the artwork. That's really cool. The ability on this card is why I picked this, though. If a unit is attacking, end the combat phase. This is the kind of effect that we have been looking for in Water, or really in anything, to deal with some of the most powerful cards in the game. Hey, this is Future Dan from the editing room. Just wanted to say that I forgot to say this during this. We have had a similar card to Song of Frost before called Glacial Guidance. Glacial Guidance does not touch champions. So the big difference between these two cards is that Song of Frost affects any unit. Glacial Guidance only targets allies. And that's actually a really big deal. Song of Frost, I think, is playable, and Glacial Guidance is very difficult to play because against non-ally decks, it doesn't really do anything. Neither are really good against decks that aren't attacking much, but the ability to affect units, as we're going to talk about in a little bit, is the major difference here, because the kind of game-ending plays that about half the decks in the metagame make are based around champions attacking. So this just has so much more flexibility, not to mention that extra class bonus for Tamer. So I just really wanted to mention that because I figured if I didn't, somebody was going to say something about it. That's the major difference, and that's why Song of Frost is so sweet. This might not be a sleeper pick, because I think a lot of people who are pretty into the competitive game can see the power of this card, but I think a lot of people will write it off immediately as a Tamer only card, and it is not. This is a card that you are going to jam into many decks, at least in the sideboard, many water decks, because this is, this has some italicized text, some reminder text that helps clarify exactly how good this is too. So it says, you end the combat phase. As a phase ends, banish all triggers, activations, and materializations on the effect stack. So if a unit is attacking, that means while an on-attack trigger is on the stack. For example, let's say that the opponent attacks with Hasty Messenger and then triggers the on-attack, discard a card, and draw a card. You're going to have to stop your opponent right away. Say, hold on, don't do that yet. You can go in response. I'm going to Song of Frost. It's going to end the combat phase. That damage isn't going to be dealt. And that draw card, that discard a card and draw a card effect is going to be banished from the stack. Your opponent will not get to resolve that effect. Obviously, using this against Hasty Messenger is just going to kind of be like trolling them in some way, unless it's just really important to prevent them from discarding that card. Because this will have some much bigger benefits later in the game. For example, your opponent does, I think we've talked about like every video so far, it's just a powerful card. Your opponent plays Rending Flames, and then they go and they resolve the on attack. You can actually let them resolve the on attack. In this case, you want them to do that to banish the cards from their graveyard. And then you play Song of Frost and the combat phase. That attack does not resolve. We had for a while a dominance of Wind Lorraine playing the Ferrari build, or the one that's like the first deck profile we posted. That was playing Infusion to infuse up a sword and then attack with it. As soon as they attack with that sword, you Song of Frost and the combat phase, they get nothing out of it. If your opponent cleaves your board, your opponent plays they drew their cleave card, they go and play all your little animals and beasts away. This is a big Tamer play, of course. Then you can Song of Frost. This is so much better than trying to prevent damage to a single unit or something. You simply end the combat phase, and that entire sweep is gone. If your opponent had just leveled to Lorraine level 2 and they're looking forward to drawing like 3 cards off of sweeping your board, you play this 1 card from hand and end it. They get nothing. They get nothing out of it, and that is so powerful. I think this card, obviously against attacking focused decks, but against attacking focused decks, this is really good. Actually, yeah, okay, and I just realized this too as I was recording this video. 1,000 Refractions. This is another really great example of a card. We've been playing 1,000 Refractions in a lot of our assassin decks. As sometimes it's just like a one of, but if you draw it, and you stock preparation counters, you don't have anything else to do with them. This 1,000 Refractions can represent a lot of damage in one turn. And if you Song of Frost the first 1,000 Refractions, then when that phase ends, it gets banished, and then they don't get to return it to their hand. And you can completely shut that down too. There's so much I think that Song of Frost does that is very, very potent. That I think this is a very worthwhile card. Any water deck should be looking at this, at least in the sideboard, to deal with certain attack-focused decks. And I think Tamer decks are really going to like it, just as a way to, further protect their board and stop themselves from losing as they're trying to get to that pride level to be able to take the opponent out. So very good card. I think it's very worth being our number 2. I'm sorry it was another Tamer card, but really this one's a more widely focused card that any deck should be able to run. So any water deck. So that's number 2, Song of Frost. All right, and our number 1 sleeper pick card, and the reason I'm picking this card is because I think a lot of people are going to read into this card differently than I think it actually is going to end up getting played. I think people are just missing that it's playable right now. That is Dawn of Ashes. Dawn of Ashes is a 3-cost unique domain cleric cataclysm. I love that type line. It has upkeep. At the beginning of your recollection phase, reveal a card at random from your memory. If that card is not norm element, sacrifice Dawn of Ashes. Dawn of Ashes then has non-norm element cards cost 1 more to activate. So this is a card that equally taxes both players on non-norm element cards. But as has been the case in many card games in the past, equal tax cards are only equal if you don't play into them appropriately, right? So I think Dawn of Ashes has the potential to see play as a way to stall out other decks, especially ones that are looking to combo, like Rye decks in particular, will not enjoy seeing a Dawn of Ashes in play because it will make it a little too expensive for them to keep trying to combo off. And if you play around your Dawn of Ashes correctly, you are able to keep it in play as long as you need to develop your own win con against your opponent or find other ways to stop their win con or something. I think this is a card that if you're trying to build a control deck, you should at least think about this. You do not have to build it so that it stays in play. In fact, you can deliberately play it just to try and stall one turn. If you predict that's all you need, like I need one turn to get a certain materialize next turn or something, you can just go ahead and put non-norm element cards into your memory when you play it, pass the turn. Your opponent, they kind of stumble because suddenly all their good cards cost more to play. And then on your turn, you just let it go away. And I think that's going to be a viable play. Look, I'm not saying every deck plays this card, right? That's the point of the sleeper cards. They're all played by Tamer or they're Dawn of Ashes. But Dawn of Ashes is going to be a card where I think you'll be surprised when someone plays this against you. You go, oh, okay, actually I can't win the game now. And the opponent is playing around it appropriately because they knew it was coming. And they stall you out and they end up winning the game because of it. It's actually a potent little taxing card that I will not be surprised to see fitting into some sideboards or fitting into some main boards in Ascent Houston with some of the top performing decks. Now, I could be totally wrong on this one. Okay, this is really a bit more of a gamble, but this is a card that I just feel like has enough unspoken, undiscovered potential that where if it does get some amount of play, people are going to be very surprised. And now you'll be able to say that, you know what, Dan told me that was going to happen. And if it doesn't happen, I'm wrong. That's okay too. That's fine. But I like this card quite a bit. It is like an Orb of Choking Fumes, but it can last more than one turn. And it doesn't cost a whole materialize to use, which I think is a pretty nice benefit to it as well. And it doesn't take a slot in your material deck as well. Orb of Choking Fumes is not something that gets a ton of play, but that's, I think, just because it's a one-shot card and your opponent just can wait it out. Whereas Dawn of Ashes, you can deliberately play around it so that it can stay out longer or just play another copy of it if this one has to go away for some reason. If you're playing around it, if you build around it, you can also include more norm element cards in your deck to stop yourself from being as harmed as your opponent, who will, if you're sideboarding in against or something, is clearly going to be disproportionately harmed by you playing this card. So that's my number one pick for, I think, the biggest sleeper in the set. Again, not because I think it's the most powerful card in the set, but because I think it is being the most slept on right now. Number one pick is Dawn of Ashes. So that's going to do it for our top 5 sleeper picks, which ultimately was kind of like top 5 Tamer cards, a little bit top 4 Tamer cards, and then Dawn of Ashes. But really, I'm just super excited to see how Tamer performs. I want to know, what do you think, though? This is going to be a really interesting one. What do you think are the cards that people are sleeping on the most right now? Cards you don't see people talking about, but that you think are going to make a big impact in competitive play. Let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts, or let me know where I'm wrong. Maybe you're like, Dan, Dawn of Ashes is just garbage. Don't even worry about that. Like, that's fine too. I'm okay. I would not be here on YouTube if I was not okay being wrong. So I got to put out that opinion sometimes, and we'll just see what happens. But that is my personal top 5 picks for sleeper picks. If you guys enjoyed this content, again, we've got a bunch of other top 5 videos. Make sure you check those out. Make sure you sub to the channel to get our really awesome deep coverage of Grand Archive Fractured Crown coming in August. And until then, I think we've got one more video to come here. So stay tuned for that. One more top 5 video. That'll be coming really soon. So hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching another Main Deck video. You can support Main Deck by shopping at tcgplayer.com using our affiliate link. Check the description of the video for details. Main Deck is sponsored by J-Dubs Sports Cards and Gaming. Visit jwwcards.com and by our amazing patrons. Get exclusive content and other cool perks on the Main Deck Patreon. And hey, while you're here, I bet you'd like one of these videos. Go ahead, click one. I know you're gonna love it.